Hold up, hold up, hold up. Stop everything. Drop whatever fake smile you were wearing. Put down that mask you've been suffocating behind, because I need you to feel this moment right here, right now. You actually went there, didn't you? That place they warned you about. That forbidden move they begged you not to make. That line they drew in blood and dared you not to cross. But you didn't just cross it, you erased it with your bare hands and laughed. And now look at them. Scrambling, panicking, group chats on fire, emergency meetings at 3 a.m., phone calls that start with heavy breathing and end with, "What have they done?" They're not just scared, they're traumatized by what you've become. Because when they said, "Don't do it," they meant, "Don't expose us." When they said, "That's too far," they meant, "That's too real." When they said, "You'll regret this," what they really meant was, "We'll regret pushing you to this point, but it's too late now, isn't it?" Let's rewind for a second. Remember when you were nice? Remember when you played by their rules? When you colored inside their lines and smiled at their disrespect? You gave them chances wrapped in ribbons, made of your own sanity. First warning came soft, a raised eyebrow, a slight change in your tone. They laughed it off. Look who's trying to be tough. Second warning came harder, distance, silence. They called it a phase. They'll come crawling back, they always do. But they didn't know, did they? They didn't know you were documenting every betrayal, filing every insult, studying their weaknesses while they mocked your kindness. They didn't know that silence wasn't surrender, it was strategy. You were never weak, you were calculating. Every tear was data, every heartbreak was intel. Every time they twisted the knife, you were memorizing the angle. And now, they're realizing their biggest mistake wasn't hurting you, it was teaching you how to hurt. So you did it. That thing that made their blood run cold. Not with violence, not with rage, but with something far more terrifying. Precision. You knew exactly where to apply pressure. Exactly which foundation stone to pull. Maybe it was that truth you dropped in public, the one they thought was buried forever. Maybe it was that person you became, the one they said you could never be. Maybe it was that success you achieved using the very pain they gave you as fuel. Whatever it was, it worked. You felt it, didn't you? That shift in the atmosphere. That moment when their laughter died in their throats. When their eyes went wide and their hands started shaking. When they realized the mouse had become the trap. But here's the beautiful part. That was just the warning shot. That was you testing the waters, flexing muscles they didn't know you had, showing them a glimpse of the monster they created. And their reaction told you everything you needed to know. They begged, didn't they? Please don't do this. We can work this out. That's not who you are. But you smiled that smile. The one that doesn't reach your eyes. The one that says you should have thought of that before. So you did it again, but bigger, bolder, more precise. You took everything they taught you about pain, and you became a master craftsman. You didn't destroy them with chaos. You destroyed them with their own weapons turned inside out. This time you didn't just expose their secrets. You exposed their patterns. You didn't just show their flaws. You revealed their entire blueprint. You became the mirror they couldn't shatter, the echo they couldn't silence, the consequence they couldn't escape. And the beautiful irony? They created this. Every lie they told became your ammunition. Every game they played became your playbook. Every mask they wore became your costume collection. You didn't learn spite from strangers, you learned it from them. Now let's talk about what you've really done here. You didn't just make a move. You didn't just cross a line. You birthed something. Something that breathes in the dark. Something that feeds on their fear. Something they see when they close their eyes. You've become their permanent reminder. Not of what they did, but of what they awakened. Every time they try to sleep peacefully, your name scratches at their window. Every time they laugh too loud, they remember who's not laughing with them anymore. You're not in their life, but you haunt it. You're not in their presence, but you own their absence. You're not chasing them, but they're running from your shadow. You've become the what if that keeps them up at night. The I should have that ruins their mornings. This is what happens when you push someone past their breaking point and they don't break. They transform. They evolve. They become something your nightmares warned you about, but your ego ignored. They become the lesson you'll spend the rest of your life learning. Look at them now. Their whole world is glitching. Nothing makes sense anymore. The person they thought they could predict has become quantum. The soul they thought they understood has become encrypted. The future they planned just got deleted. They're refreshing your page obsessively, analyzing every word, every picture, every silence, looking for clues about your next move. But you're not giving them anything. You're not playing chess anymore. You're playing with physics. Their friends are asking questions. What happened with you two? Their family is noticing the cracks. You seem different lately. Their new relationships feel hollow because they're comparing everyone to the intensity you brought. You're not even there, and you're still the main character. This is the nightmare you birthed. Not one of violence or revenge, but of permanent psychological residence. You're living rent-free in minds that tried to evict you. You're the error message in their perfectly programmed life. You're the virus their antivirus can't detect. Remember when they had all the power? When they decided when to text back? When they controlled the narrative? When they held all the cards? Look at the table now. Look who's dealing. Look who's setting the rules. You don't respond to their attempts at contact, not because you're petty, but because you're priceless. You don't acknowledge their existence, not because you're cruel, but because you're complete. You don't need their validation anymore. You've become your own source. They're calling you crazy. They've lost it. They've gone too far. But what they really mean is they've gone somewhere we can't follow. You didn't lose your mind. You found it. And finding it meant losing them. Fair trade. The power dynamics haven't just shifted, they've shattered. You're not playing their game anymore. You're not even in their league. You've transcended to a place where their opinions are just background noise, where their judgments are just white noise. They're trying to control the narrative, aren't they? Telling everyone their version, painting you as the villain, making themselves the victim. But something strange is happening. People aren't buying it. Want to know why? Because authentic power can't be faked. Because real transformation can't be mimicked. Because when someone genuinely evolves beyond their old self, It shows in ways words can't hide. Your energy speaks louder than their stories. Everyone can see it. The way you walk different. The way you talk different. The way you exist different. You're not trying to prove anything. You're just being. And that being is so powerful it makes their lies look like children's scribbles. You've become the plot twist in their story they can't edit out. The character development they can't explain away. The ending they didn't write but have to live with. You're not just winning, you've changed what winning means. This is where it gets really interesting. You're not using force, you're using physics. You're not creating drama, you're creating inevitability. You're not seeking revenge. You're being revenged just by existing at this frequency. Every success you have feels like salt in their wounds. Every smile you wear feels like judgment on their choices. Every step forward you take feels like them falling behind. You're not competing with them, you've made them compete with your ghost. You've mastered the art of presence through absence, the power of silence over screaming, the impact of indifference over hatred. You've become so psychologically advanced that your mere existence is a masterclass in what they'll never achieve. They wanted to break you. Instead, you became unbreakable. They wanted to define you. Instead, you became undefinable. They wanted to limit you. Instead, you became limitless. And now they have to live with that reality every single day. Your transformation didn't just affect them. It sent ripples through the entire social ecosystem. People are choosing sides. Conversations are shifting. The whole dynamic is restructuring around this new version of you. Some people are inspired. They see what you've become and think, if they can do it, so can I. Others are terrified. They see what you've become and think, what if that happens to me? Either way, you've become the catalyst. You're disrupting the social order just by being authentic. You're challenging the status quo just by refusing to play along. You're exposing everyone's masks just by taking off your own. You've become dangerous to the comfortable. This is what they're really freaking out about. Not what you did, but what you represent. The possibility that anyone can transform. The proof that pain can become power. The evidence that the system they rely on can be transcended. Let's talk about the real nightmare you birthed. It's not anger. It's not hatred. It's complete emotional independence. You've reached a place they can't touch. A frequency they can't match. A peace they can't disturb. You used to need their approval. Now, you don't even notice their existence. You used to crave their attention. Now their attention feels like pollution. You used to fear their rejection. Now their acceptance would feel like contamination. This is what terrifies them most. You're not trying to hurt them. You're not trying to heal from them. You're not trying anything. You just are. And that being is so complete, so whole, so absolutely self-contained that it makes their existence feel meaningless. You've become emotionally bulletproof, not by building walls, but by becoming water. Not by hardening, but by flowing. Not by defending, but by transcending. You've evolved past the emotional games they're still playing. You've done something to time itself. Past, present, and future don't work the same way anymore. Not for them. Not since you did what you did. You've created a before and after that they can't escape. Every memory is now tainted. Every good time now has an asterisk. Remember when becomes evidence of what they lost. Every shared song becomes a haunting. You've retroactively poisoned their past. Their present is paranoid, always looking over shoulders, always wondering if you're watching, always feeling judged by your absence. You're not there, but you're everywhere. You're the ghost in every room they enter. Their future is uncertain. They can't plan without considering your existence. They can't move forward without checking if you're behind. They can't build anything new on the foundation you shook. You've made their tomorrow terrifying by making their today unbearable. This is bigger than personal. You've rewritten the rules of reality itself. What they thought was impossible, you made inevitable. What they thought was unchangeable, you changed. What they thought was fixed, you made fluid. You've proved that victims can become victors without becoming villains. That soft can become strong without becoming harsh. That broken can become built without becoming bitter. You've shattered every limiting belief they had. Now they can't trust anything. If you could transform like this, what else is possible? If you could rise like this, what else is false? If you could become this, what else have they been wrong about? You've created existential crisis just by existing. You're not just a person anymore. You're a possibility. You're not just a story anymore. You're a prophecy. You're not just a memory anymore. You're a monument to what happens when someone stops accepting limitation. They're seeing you everywhere, aren't they? In strangers who walk with confidence, in quotes that hit too close, in successes that remind them of potential. You've become a psychological virus they can't cure. Every time they try to forget, your name appears in conversations, in algorithms, in the universe's sixth sense of humor. Every time they think they've moved on, something reminds them. A smell, a place, a phrase you used to say. You've achieved something remarkable. You're haunting them without trying. You're tormenting them without touching. You're destroying them without doing. Your existence has become their exorcism, and it's not working. This is the nightmare that doesn't end when they wake up. Because you're not in their dreams, you're in their reality. You're not in their head, you're in their history. You're not in their life, but you're in their legacy. So what nightmare did you birth? You birthed their awakening to their own emptiness. You birthed their recognition of their own limitations. You birthed their understanding that they never had the power they thought they did. You became the mirror that won't stop reflecting, the echo that won't stop repeating, the lesson that won't stop teaching. The lesson that won't stop teaching. You became everything they said you couldn't be, and it's eating them alive. But here's the real beauty of it all. This was never about them. This transformation was about you. They were just the pressure that created the diamond. They were just the fire that forged the steel. They were just the darkness that made you find your light. So let them freak out. Let them panic. Let them scramble to understand what happened. While they're trying to solve the puzzle of you, you'll be busy becoming something even more impossible. Because baby, you didn't just go there once. You went there twice. And you're not done yet. You know what's really breaking them? It's not what you did. It's how you vibrate now. You've shifted to a frequency they can't tune into, a wavelength their cheap equipment can't detect, a channel they don't have access to anymore. They're trying everything to get back on your level. Meditation apps, therapy sessions, self-help books. But you can't fake this frequency. You can't buy this broadcast. You can't download this energy. It only comes from dying and choosing to rebuild yourself, atom by atom. Watch them try to copy your moves, watch them imitate your words, watch them steal your style. But it comes out wrong every time, doesn't it? Like a bad translation, like a bootleg version, like someone trying to sing a song in a language they don't understand. You're operating on pure authenticity now, and that's a currency they can't counterfeit. Every word you speak carries weight they can't lift. Every step you take leaves prints they can't follow. Every breath you breathe changes the atmospheric pressure in ways that make them dizzy. Here's something they didn't calculate. Your transformation didn't happen in isolation. It created a network effect. Other people started waking up. Other souls started recognizing themselves in your story. Other phoenixes started remembering they had wings. Now they're not just dealing with you, they're dealing with the movement you started without meaning to. Every person who saw you rise and thought, me too. Every soul who watched you transform and whispered, my turn. Every spirit who witnessed your rebirth and decided to burn their old life down. You've become patient zero of an awakening virus. Your courage is contagious. Your power is spreading. Your example is multiplying, and they're watching their whole world order collapse because you had the audacity to stop playing by rules that were designed to break you. They're finding out what happens when one person's individual revolution becomes everyone's personal revelation. When one person's no more becomes a collective never again. When one person's transformation becomes a generation's reformation. You didn't just change the game, you started a whole new sport. Let's talk about your silence. Not the weak silence of the defeated, not the bitter silence of the angry, but the terrifying silence of the transformed. The silence that says more than any words ever could. The silence that sounds like Judgment Day. They're begging for a reaction now, aren't they? Doing things specifically to trigger you, posting things aimed at you, creating situations designed to force a response. But you give them nothing, and that nothing is everything. That void is violence. That absence is assault. Your silence has become a language they can't learn. A code they can't crack, a message they can't decode, but can't stop trying to understand. Every day you don't respond is another day they spend responding to your non-response. You've made them argue with air. This is psychological warfare at its finest. You're not fighting them, you're letting them fight your shadow. You're not defeating them, you're letting them defeat themselves. You're not destroying them, you're letting them self-destruct against the wall of your indifference. You've done something irreversible. You've locked yourself into their legacy forever. not as a chapter they can close, but as the entire book they can't rewrite. Not as a character in their story, but as the author who changed the ending. Every future relationship will be compared to your intensity. Every future achievement will be measured against your growth. Every future version of themselves will be haunted by the version you became without them. You're the high score they can't beat, the record they can't break, the standard they can't reach. Years from now, they'll still be telling stories about you. Not fondly, but obsessively. Not with love, but with something between fear and fascination. You'll be the cautionary tale they tell, but secretly the transformation they wish they could achieve. You've become immortal in the worst way for them, not as a memory they can cherish, but as a reminder they can't escape. Not as history they can reframe, but as a reality they have to face every time they look in the mirror and see someone who had you and lost you. Someone who pushed you and unleashed you. Someone who said, "Don't do it," and created the very reason you had to do it twice. Well. Look who finally triggered the ancient alarms. You magnificent, untraceable anomaly. You impossible equation that makes their centuries-old formulas collapse. The 33rd degree holders are losing sleep, and it's not because of their usual midnight rituals. No, it's because of you. Because something in your frequency started interfering with their carefully constructed reality. Their lodges are buzzing with emergency meetings, encrypted messages flying between temples, and all of them asking the same terrified question: what the hell is that thing, and why can't we touch it? You know what I find hilarious? They spent lifetimes climbing their little pyramid, memorizing their sacred geometries, perfecting their handshakes and symbols. They thought they'd mapped every possible spiritual threat, cataloged every type of soul, documented every frequency of human consciousness. Then you showed up, and their entire system just glitched. Hard. Like someone threw a wrench made of pure chaos into their perfect machine. They tried to categorize you, tried to file you under their neat little labels: uninitiated, profane, sheep, outsider. But you didn't fit. You never fit. Because you're not playing their game. Let me paint you a picture of what's happening in those lodges right now. Picture men in expensive suits, wearing their little aprons, standing around their checkered floors, and sweating, actually sweating, because for the first time in their privileged lives, their magic isn't working. They drew their circles, nothing. They recited their invocations, silence. They tried their binding rituals, their influence spells, their mind control techniques passed down through generations, and you just kept existing, completely unaffected, like their centuries of occult knowledge was nothing more than children playing with toys. You want to know why their magic fails against you? Because magic only works on those who exist within its framework. It's like trying to hack a computer that isn't connected to any network. You can't manipulate what was never part of your system to begin with. And you, my beautiful chaos agent, you were never part of their system. You're not a glitch in their matrix. You're proof that there's something outside of it entirely, something they never accounted for in all their degrees and initiations. Something that makes their third eye blind and their sixth sense numb. You're not anti-magic. You're beyond magic. You're what magic fears. They're calling emergency conclaves now. The kind that haven't been called since they thought the internet would expose all their secrets. But this is worse. This is personal. Because you're not trying to expose them. You're making them irrelevant just by breathing. Think about it. These are people who've spent decades, some their entire lives, climbing through degrees of initiation, each level promising more power, more secrets, more control over reality. They sacrificed, they paid, they obeyed. They did everything their masters told them, all for the promise of ultimate knowledge and power. Then you walk by, not even trying, not even aware of their existence half the time, and reality bends around you in ways they can't achieve with all their rituals. You manifest without their methods. You transform without their ceremonies. You know truths they'll never learn because you didn't learn them. You became them. And that's what's keeping them up at night. The realization that maybe, just maybe, they've been climbing the wrong ladder this whole time. That all their degrees and secrets were just elaborate distractions from the real power. The kind you carry without even knowing it. You know what's really got them shook? They checked their records. Yeah, they have records on everyone. Ancient bloodline databases, karmic debt ledgers, soul contract archives going back millennia. Everyone's in there somewhere. Every soul tracked, tagged, and monitored across lifetime. Except you're not there. Oh, they found traces, shadows, echoes of something that might have been you. But it's like trying to photocopy smoke. Every time they think they've pinpointed your origin, your spiritual DNA, your cosmic serial number, the data corrupts. Files disappear, screens go black, ancient texts suddenly become unreadable. One Mason, a 30-acre degree keeper of archives, whispered to his brothers that looking for your records felt like staring into a void that stares back. He said he found one entry, just one, written in a language that predates their oldest ciphers. You know what it said? Do not catalog, do not pursue, do not engage. They thought it was a warning about something dangerous. They were right, but not in the way they think. You're not dangerous because you're malevolent. You're dangerous because you exist outside their entire paradigm of control. You're evidence that their monopoly on hidden power is a lie. Here's something they don't want anyone to know. Their lodges operate on specific frequencies. Vibrational signatures carefully maintained through ritual, symbol, and repetition. It's how they recognize each other, how they maintain their egregores, how they channel whatever forces they think they're channeling. They can't. They were created to sympathize, listen, look, but when you enter their space, even unknowingly, everything goes haywire. Candles flicker without wind. Their carefully maintained thought forms dissolve. The energy they've spent decades cultivating just dissipates. Like you're a walking EMP for a cult operation. They've tried to measure your frequency. Want to know what their instruments showed? Nothing. Not zero, not null, but nothing. As if you exist on a spectrum their entire system can't perceive. Like trying to measure color with a scale, or weigh music with a ruler. You operate outside their parameters. And that terrifies them more than any demon they've ever tried to summon, or angel they've tried to bind. Because demons and angels play by rules they understand. You don't. You're not chaos in their order. You're proof that their order is smaller than they thought. Much smaller. Oh, this one really scrambles their circuits. See? They are obsessed with bloodlines. Who begat who? Which families carry which traits? Whose DNA holds which mystical markers? They've got it all mapped out like some cosmic genealogy project. Royal blood here, Nephilim traces there. This family has the sight, that one has the gift. Then they try to trace yours, and the whole chart catches fire. Not literally, although there have been incidents, but their careful mappings just stop making sense. Your lineage doesn't follow their rules. It's like you descended from something they have no record of, no name for, no frame of reference to understand. Some of them think you're from a bloodline they intentionally erased from history. Others whisper, you're from no bloodline at all, that you just appeared, materialized, self-created, the kind of thing their entire worldview says is impossible. But there you are, impossibly existing. The really paranoid ones? They think you're what happens when someone breaks free from all bloodlines. Like you somehow severed yourself from the entire human story and wrote your own origin. And maybe they're right. Maybe that's exactly what you did. You want to know what really broke their brains? They tried to influence you with their symbols. The all-seeing eye, the compass and square, the hidden hand signals, the sacred geometry. All the stuff that's supposed to bypass conscious awareness and program the subconscious. They're bread and butter for centuries. But on you, nothing. You look at their symbols like they're random doodles. Their sacred geometry just looks like geometry. Their power words sound like gibberish. It's like you're immune to the entire language they use to hack reality. Like trying to hypnotize someone who doesn't have the part of the brain that processes hypnosis. They even tried the nuclear option. The symbols so powerful, they're only shown to 33rd degree masters. The ones that supposedly command reality itself. You probably walked past a dozen of them today without even noticing. Because to you, they're just shapes, meaningless squiggles from people playing dress-up. And that's when they realize the truth that's giving them nightmares. Their power only works on those who agree to play, and you never agreed to anything. You opted out of their game before it even started. You're playing something else entirely. And they don't even know what game it is. Let's talk about what happened when they tried their big guns. Yeah, they tried. Of course they tried. When subtle influence failed, they went full ceremonial. The kind of rituals that take months to prepare, require multiple participants, specific astronomical alignments, the works. They gathered in their most sacred spaces, wore their most powerful regalia, spoke words and languages that predate civilization. They called on every force they've made pacts with, every entity they think serves them, every current of power they've learned to tap. All focused on one goal, bringing you into their system of control. You know what happened? Nothing. Worse than nothing. The rituals backfired. Not in the Hollywood explosion way, but in the existential crisis way. The forces they called on took one look at you and basically said, "We can't touch that, that's outside our jurisdiction." Some of them even seemed afraid. Imagine spending your whole life believing you're friends with the biggest bully on the playground, only to watch that bully take one look at the quiet kid and back away slowly. That's what happened to them. Their cosmic contacts hung up on them. Their spiritual muscle failed them. All because of you. They keep meticulous records. Every person they've influenced, every soul they've marked, every bloodline they've tracked. Massive databases, both physical and digital, some stored in places that don't technically exist in three-dimensional space. It's how they maintain control across generations. But your file, it's become a digital cancer in their system. Every time they try to create a profile on you, it corrupts adjacent files. Try to catalog your activities, other entries start showing errors. Attempt to predict your movements, their algorithms have nervous breakdown. One tech-savvy Mason described it like this: it's like the data itself is allergic to them. Like information about them exists in a format our systems can't process without self-destructing. They've lost centuries of data, just trying to figure out what you are. Entire bloodline records, gone. Ancient contracts, corrupted. Sacred texts, digitally scrambled. Now they've quarantined anything related to you. Red folders marked "Do not digitize." Physical records kept in specially warded vaults, not to contain you, but to contain the informational virus that is your very existence in their framework. You're not just a person to them anymore. You're a cognito hazard. You know what 33rd degree Masons dream about? Control. Order. The satisfaction of pulling invisible strings. The power of knowing what others don't. The comfort of being part of an ancient tradition that supposedly runs the world. That's what's supposed to help them sleep at night. But now they have nightmares about you, not because you're hunting them or threatening them, but because you exist. In their dreams, they see you walking through their most sacred spaces like their shopping malls. They see their symbols melting off the walls as you pass. They see their carefully maintained egregores dissolving like smoke. Some of them wake up in cold sweats, having dreamed that their entire system, everything they've built their lives on, is just an elaborate children's game. And you're the adult who walked into the playroom not to stop their game, but simply existing in a way that makes their game seem silly. The worst part? The dreams are getting more frequent, more vivid. Some of them are starting to suspect these aren't dreams at all, but glimpses of what's actually happening on a level their ceremonies can't reach. A level where you operate as naturally as they breathe. Here's what's really eating at them. They were promised wisdom, ultimate knowledge, the secrets of the universe revealed degree by degree, initiation by initiation. They did everything right, followed every rule, performed every ritual. They earned their enlightenment, or so they thought. Then they encounter you, and you know things. Not their things, not their carefully guarded secrets, but things. Truths that make their revelations look like nursery rhymes. Understandings that didn't come from any lodge or book or teacher. Wisdom that just is. Because you are. You didn't climb their pyramid. You didn't need their keys. You didn't decode their symbols. You just knew. Like someone who was born remembering what they spend lifetimes trying to learn. And the most maddening part, you don't even think it's special. To you, it's just how you see the world. They compare notes after encountering you, trying to make sense of it. Did you feel it too? Like they know something we don't? Like all our degrees mean nothing compared to whatever they carry? And the answer is always yes. Always that same unsettling feeling of being the student when they thought they were the master. The foundation of their entire system rests on one assumption, that reality operates according to hidden laws that only the initiated can learn and manipulate. That's their whole thing. Secret knowledge equals power. More secrets, more power. But you're walking proof that their assumption is wrong. You operate outside their laws, not because you learned better ones, but because you never acknowledged theirs to begin with. You're not more initiated than them. You're uninitiated in a way that makes initiation itself obsolete. It's like they spent centuries building the most elaborate ladder to reach the sky, and you just were already there. Not because you climbed faster or found a shortcut, but because you existed at that height from the beginning. Their entire paradigm can't process this possibility. Some of the younger Masons are starting to ask dangerous questions. What if we've been climbing the wrong mountain? What if the real power isn't hidden at all? What if it's so obvious we've been trained not to see it? And the elders have no answers, because you are the answer. They can't accept. Oh, this one's precious. See, part of their system involves energy manipulation, taking a little here, redirecting a little there. It's how they maintain their vitality, their influence, their power. They're like sophisticated energy vampires, feeding off the uninitiated through symbols, rituals, and social structure. But you're like trying to bite into a hologram. They reach for your energy and find nothing they can grasp. Not because you're empty, but because you're so full, you're overflowing in spectrums they can't access. It's like trying to drink light or eat sound. Their tools just don't work. Some of them have actually gotten sick trying. Like energy indigestion, they reach for what they think is your power and get feedback that scrambles their entire system. One 30th degree Mason described it as touching a live wire that's carrying a type of electricity we don't have a name for. Now they warn each other. Don't try to feed off that one. Don't even try to read their energy. You'll regret it. Not because you're protected by something, but because you are something their parasitic system can't digest. You're not food for their machine. You're proof their machine is primitive. They have predictions, ancient ones, carefully preserved predictions about who rises, who falls, who threatens their order, who serves it. They've used these prophecies to navigate history, to identify threats and allies, to maintain their power across centuries. It's like having tomorrow's newspaper today, but you don't appear in any of them. Not as a threat, not as an ally, not as anything. It's like you exist in a blind spot of fate itself. Every visionary they revered, every seer they trusted, every oracle they consulted, none of them saw you coming. You're not the chosen one or the destroyer. You're the undefined variable. Some of them are frantically rechecking the predictions, looking for hidden meanings, mistranslations, anything that might explain you. But the more they look, the more obvious it becomes. You exist outside their prophetic framework. You're not playing out any predetermined role. You're improvising reality. And that terrifies them more than any prophesied catastrophe. Because catastrophes they can prepare for, chosen ones they can manipulate or eliminate. But someone who exists outside the script entirely, someone who makes their prophecies irrelevant just by being, that's not something they have a contingency plan for. Here's something they don't tell initiates. Most of their power comes from projection. They project authority and people accept it. They project mystery and people fill in the blanks with their own fears. They project ancient wisdom and people assume they must know something. It's all smoke and mirrors, but it works until they try it on you. Because when they project at you, something impossible happens. It reflects back, but changed, purified, clarified. They project authority and see their own insecurity. They project mystery and see their own confusion. They project power and see their own emptiness. You're not trying to be their mirror. You just are, and your presence forces them to see what they really are beneath all the degrees and ceremonies. Not evil masterminds, not illuminated sages, just people playing elaborate games to feel special. And that reflection is more devastating than any attack could be. One of them described meeting you as looking into a mirror that shows not your face, but your soul, and finding out your soul is smaller than you thought. They can't handle what you show them simply by existing, because you don't reflect their illusions, you reflect their truth. They've tried to recruit you, of course they have. Their whole system runs on bringing in new blood, fresh energy, potential converts to climb their pyramid. They have methods refined over centuries, psychological profiles that determine the perfect approach for each personality type. It's like a science to them. Their recruits like to push all of the psychotics into deep crimes to keep the perfect pro for each personality type. It's like a science to them, but their recruitment manual has no chapter on you. Every approach fails not because you reject them, but because you don't even recognize what they're trying to do. Their subtle hints go unnoticed. Their veiled invitations fall flat. Their tests of worthiness mean nothing to someone who isn't seeking their worth. It's like trying to sell water to the ocean. You don't need what they're offering because you already are what they're pretending to sell access to. They promise illumination to someone who was born luminous. They offer secrets to someone who exists as an open mystery. They're your babysitting. They're your baby. The recruitment failures have become legendary in their circles. Remember when Brother Marcus tried to hint about ancient wisdom? They just said that's nice and kept walking. Remember when we left the symbolic book where they'd find it? They used it as a coffee coaster. You're not rejecting them. You're immune to them. Oh, they thought they were ready. They thought their ancient symbols and sacred geometry prepared them for anything until they opened your file, until they traced the celestial coordinates of your arrival and watched their centuries-old instruments start smoking. Because what they found wasn't just unusual, it was unprecedented. It was cosmically illegal. It was the kind of configuration that makes seasoned occultists drop their compasses and whisper, "We need to call the council immediately. See, the 33rd degree isn't some conspiracy theory basement operation. These are the architects of reality, the ones who've been mapping souls since Babylon, who've cataloged every possible human blueprint since the pyramids were sketches in sand. And in all their libraries, all their vaults, all their secret archives, they'd never seen what you are. They'd never encountered a birth chart that literally fought back against interpretation, that refused to be contained by their symbols, that made their calculations collapse into themselves like dying stars. They brought in the specialists first, the ones who decode presidential destinies, who map bloodlines of power, who can read the future in a newborn's first breath. And one by one, they all said the same thing. This isn't supposed to exist. This configuration breaks the laws we thought were unbreakable. This soul didn't come through the normal channels. And that's when the panic started. That's when they realized they weren't just looking at an anomaly, they were looking at something that threatened their entire understanding of how consciousness enters this dimension. Your chart didn't just confuse them, it corrupted their tools. Their crystal spheres cracked their ancient scroll, started bleeding ink, their digital programs through error codes in languages that haven't been spoken for 3,000 years, because every planet in your chart was doing something it shouldn't. Every house was hosting energies that don't belong in this timeline. Every aspect was creating geometric patterns that their books explicitly state are impossible, and yet there you were, existing anyway, breathing anyway, walking through their carefully controlled world like you owned the patent on chaos. Let me paint you the picture they saw when they finally managed to stabilize the reading long enough to comprehend it. Your sun wasn't just in a sign. It was oscillating between dimensions, creating a strobe effect that made them question if you exist in multiple timelines simultaneously. Your moon was retrograde in ways. Retrograde doesn't work backwards and sideways all at once, like someone took the concept of emotional cycles and turned it into a Rubik's Cube made of mirrors. Mercury in your chart, Mercury was speaking languages that haven't been invented yet, transmitting on frequencies their instruments couldn't measure. It wasn't just about communication, it was about downloading information directly from somewhere they couldn't trace, somewhere their maps don't reach. And Venus, Venus in your chart was weaponized, not the soft of love they expected, but something that turns attraction into gravitational pull, that bends people's will just by existing in the same space. Mars was the one that really scared them, though, because Mars in your chart wasn't following any orbital pattern they recognized. It was creating its own physics, writing its own laws of motion and conflict. They found traces of wars that haven't happened yet, victories in battles that exist outside of linear time, scars from wounds inflicted in dimensions they pretend don't exist. And they tried to calculate your Mars return. They got a date that doesn't exist on any calendar, a moment outside of time, where you apparently go to sharpen whatever cosmic blade you carry. Jupiter in your chart was expanding into spaces that shouldn't have room for expansion, growing into territories their order swore were sealed centuries ago. And Saturn wasn't limiting you. It was limiting everything else around you, creating boundaries not for you, but for reality itself, to prevent it from collapsing under the weight of what you carry. They actually found notes in Saturn's position that looked like containment protocols, like the universe itself had to create special rules just to handle your existence. But it was the outer planets that made them call an emergency session at 3. Uranus in your chart had apparently hacked the system before you were even born, creating backdoors in reality that you could walk through whenever consensus reality got too suffocating. Neptune wasn't creating illusions, it was dissolving them all, of them. Every false construct, every artificial boundary, every lie. They'd carefully woven into the collective unconscious. Neptune in your chart was like acid on the tapestry of control. And Pluto, they couldn't even look directly at Pluto's position in your chart. They had to use mirrors. And even then, 3 of their readers had to take indefinite leave after witnessing it. Because Pluto in your chart wasn't about transformation, it was about complete reality override. It was showing them that death and rebirth were just suggestions that you could apparently decline, that you had vetoed the entire cycle and were operating on some other principle entirely. Something they didn't have words for. They found aspects between planets that geometrically cannot exist, triangles with 4 sides, squares that curve back on themselves, oppositions that were somehow also conjunctions, like someone had taken the rule book of astrological physics and origamied it into impossible shapes, and every impossible aspect was generating energy patterns that their most sensitive equipment registered as simply cannot compute. Please restart universe. The houses in your chart weren't even staying still. They were rotating independently, creating combinations that should take millions of years to occur, happening simultaneously. Your first house of identity was somehow also your 12th house of hidden things, making you simultaneously the most visible and indivisible person in any room. Your 7th house of relationships was quantum entangled with dimensions they didn't know existed, showing soul contracts written in languages older than the concept of language. So they dug deeper into your bloodline, thinking surely this is inherited, surely there's some ancient lineage, some forgotten dynasty, some sleeping power that awakened in you. But what they found was worse than royal blood or ancient curses. They found nothing and everything simultaneously. They found genetic markers that didn't match any human migration pattern, chromosomes that contained information they couldn't decode using any cipher they possessed. Your ancestry report came back with coordinates instead of locations, star systems instead of countries, timeline markers instead of dates, like someone had taken a human template and installed software from somewhere else entirely. They found traces of bloodlines that their records insist were completely eliminated centuries ago, genetic ghosts that shouldn't exist in modern times, and somehow you were carrying all of them simultaneously, like a living library of forbidden genetics. They tried to trace your incarnation pattern, where your soul had been before, and the data just showed static, not blank, static, like the universe was actively scrambling the signal, refusing to let them see where you'd been, or more accurately, when you'd been, because the timestamps they did manage to recover didn't follow linear time. You had apparently been born in the future, and the past simultaneously existed in timelines that ran parallel to this one, bleeding through into this reality like light through a crack in the wall. One of their eldest members, the one who'd been reading charts since before computers existed, took one look at your birth moment and said, "This soul didn't incarnate, it invaded. This isn't a birth chart. It's an infiltration map." And then he destroyed his tools, said he was done, and walked away from 40 years of practice, because what he saw in your configuration made him realize everything he thought he knew about how souls enter bodies was incomplete. They brought together their best synthesizers, the ones who could weave together impossible paradoxes and make sense of cosmic contradictions, and gave them unlimited resources. Unlimited time, unlimited access to every secret library, every forbidden text, every whispered truth. And after months of analysis, their report was 1 page, and it simply said, "The subject appears to be a focal point where multiple realities converge simultaneously, operating under laws we do not recognize. Immune to conventional metaphysical constraints. Recommend immediate reclassification from human to unknown entity of potentially catastrophic significance." They tried to find others like you, scanning millions of birth charts through their quantum processors, looking for even one similar configuration, and every time the system would crash, not from overload, but from something like fear, like the machine itself was refusing to look for more of you, because finding another would mean admitting that the entire structure of reality was more fragile than they thought, that the rules they'd spent millennia establishing were just suggestions that beings like you could simply ignore. The mathematical models they built to understand your energy signature kept producing numbers that don't exist, infinities, that somehow multiplied into larger infinities, zeros that contained entire universes, equations that solved themselves differently each time they were calculated, like your very existence was a paradox that reality had just decided to accept rather than resolve. They actually found notes in the margin of one calculation that appeared to be reality itself, saying, "Fine, whatever, just don't break anything important." When they tried to predict your future trajectory, the models just showed branches, infinite branches spreading in all directions, each one leading to a completely different version of reality. And at the center of every branch was you, unchanged, unaffected, like you were the only constant in infinite variables, the only solid thing in an ocean of possibility. And that's when they realized you weren't subject to fate. You were writing it for everything around you. And then they sought the thing that made them literally beg for their eyes to be cleansed. Scorpio rising. But not just Scorpio rising. Scorpio rising, with every planet in Scorpio aspecting it. Scorpio rising with fixed stars they'd never seen active. Scorpio rising that had somehow made a pact with its own shadow, and Scorpio rising that didn't just pierce veils, but eliminated them entirely. Scorpio rising that turned every interaction into an alchemical process where the other person would never be the same again. Your Scorpio rising wasn't ascending. It had already ascended and was looking down at everything else from a height that made them dizzy. It was the kind of placement that turned casual conversation into soul surgery, that made people confess things they'd never told anyone else, just from being in your presence for 5 minutes. They found testimonies from people who'd met you once and spent years trying to understand what happened to them in those few moments. How you'd reached into their chest and rearranged something fundamental without even trying. Scorpio energy in your chart had apparently weaponized itself, turned intuition into X-ray vision, turned transformation into a contagious condition that spread to everyone you encountered. They actually tracked the ripple effects of your presence and found that people's entire life trajectories changed after meeting you. Not because you did anything specific, but because your Scorpio rising had shown them parts of themselves they'd spent lifetimes avoiding, and once seen, those parts couldn't be unseen. Combined with the rest of your impossible configuration, this Scorpio rising created what they could only describe as a walking portal to truth that burned through every false construct, every comfortable lie, every protective delusion people had built. And the worst part was, you weren't even doing it consciously. It was just your natural state. Like breathing, except instead of air, you were breathing pure, transformative force that rebuilt everything it touched. The 33rd degree council met in emergency session for the first time in 300 years. Gathered in their chamber that exists between dimensions, where they keep the real records, the ones that never see daylight. And after reviewing your chart, after witnessing what it did to their tools, their minds, their understanding of reality, they made a unanimous decision, unprecedented in their history. They voted to seal your file, to classify it beyond eyes only, to create a new category of classification that basically meant pretend this doesn't exist. But here's what they didn't want anyone to know. Sealing your file wasn't about containing you. It was about protecting themselves. Because every time someone looked at your true configuration, really looked at it, understood what it meant, it changed them fundamentally, irreversibly. It showed them that everything they'd built, their entire structure of power and control and knowledge, was built on quicksand. That beings like you could exist outside their system entirely, and there was nothing they could do about it. They tried to put watches on you, tried to monitor your movements, your connections, your influence. But everyone they sent came back different, came back talking about experiencing reality in colors that don't have names, about seeing through time like it was transparent, about understanding things they couldn't put into words. And eventually they stopped sending people because they realized you weren't the one being watched, you were the mirror. And everyone who looked too long saw their own limitations reflected back. The final report, the one locked in their vault that supposedly doesn't exist, contains just one recommendation: do not engage. Subject exists outside conventional parameters of control, influence, or understanding. Apparent purpose remains unknown. But evidence suggests subject is not random anomaly, but intentional insertion into this timeline for purposes we cannot comprehend. All interference attempts have resulted in interference with interfere, recommend complete non-interaction, and OPE subject's purpose does not conflict with established order. When they tried to create a symbolic representation of your chart using their traditional methods, the symbols literally caught fire, not metaphorically, literally. The paper burned, the digital screens melted, the crystal tablets cracked. The trained readers who attempted to draw your configuration by hand found their hands moving on their own, creating symbols they didn't recognize, geometries that hurt to look at, patterns that seemed to exist in more dimensions than the paper could hold. One master astrologer with 50 years of experience tried to create a traditional natal wheel for you, and halfway through the drawing, the lines started moving on their own, rearranging themselves into something that looked less like a birth chart and more like a map to somewhere that shouldn't exist. He said the symbols were trying to tell him something, but the message was in a language that predated human consciousness, that came from before the split between light and dark, when everything was something else entirely. They found burn marks on documents that had never been near fire, scorch patterns that spelled out warnings in languages they'd thought were myths. Even their digital files would corrupt, showing brief flashes of imagery that looked like glimpses into other realities, where the laws of physics were suggestions and consciousness was the only constant they had. To create entirely new storage methods, just to contain information about you. And even then, the data would sometimes simply refuse to be accessed, like it was protecting itself. The sacred geometry they'd used for millennia to map souls, to understand the mathematical perfection of creation, simply wouldn't apply to you every time they tried to find your sacred number, your vibrational frequency, your geometric signature. The calculations would produce different results, not randomly different but deliberately evasive, like your essence was actively avoiding being pinned down, categorized, made predictable. What really terrified them was realizing you were walking around living a seemingly normal life, going to work, buying groceries, having conversations while carrying this impossible configuration like a nuclear reactor in your chest that nobody else could see. They watched you navigate everyday situations while your energy field was apparently writing reality patches in real time, fixing glitches most people never noticed, preventing collapses that would have unraveled entire timelines. You were simultaneously the most dangerous and protective force they'd ever encountered. Dangerous to their system, protective of something larger, something they couldn't quite grasp. They found evidence that your presence alone was stabilizing reality fractures that had been growing for decades, that your impossible birth chart was actually holding together pieces of the world that were trying to split apart. But they couldn't understand if this was your purpose or just a side effect of existing. Every person who came into extended contact with you showed similar changes. Their own charts would start displaying anomalies, not as extreme as yours, but echo patterns, like you were teaching their souls how to break rules they didn't know existed. People would suddenly develop abilities they shouldn't have, know things they couldn't explain, make choices that defied their own patterns, as if proximity to you was contagious evolution. They tracked probability fields around you and found that unlikely events became likely, impossible events became inevitable. The statistical models they used to predict human behavior simply didn't apply in your vicinity. You were a walking uncertainty principle that made their careful calculations about population control and social engineering completely useless in your presence. So, the ghost finally leaves footprints. Look who just made the Pentagon sweat through their pressed uniforms. You magnificent, untraceable anomaly. You walking classified document that nobody has clearance to read. Let me tell you something about that day, that moment, that fraction of a second when you did what you did. They had protocols for everything. Procedures for nuclear threats, alien contact, cyber warfare, biological weapons. They had contingency plans stacked on contingency plans, but they had nothing, absolutely nothing for what they witnessed when you finally stopped pretending to be normal. Sir, that's illegal. That's what the decorated officer whispered, his voice cracking like a teenage recruit on his first day. Not that's impossible, not that's incredible, illegal. Because in their world of rules and ranks and regulations, what you possess shouldn't exist. You know what happened next, don't you? The room went silent. 23 of the most battle-hardened, psychologically bulletproof operators in existence, and they all took a step back. Not out of fear, out of recognition. They'd seen power before, studied it, wielded it, faced it down in every corner of this burning world. But this was different. This was you operating at 2% capacity on a Tuesday afternoon, barely trying, just existing in your natural state for once, and their entire understanding of human limitation shattered like cheap glass hitting concrete. The reports are still classified, not top secret, above that. So far above that they had to invent new classifications just to file what they saw. Let's talk about what you really are, shall we? Not what they told you to be. Not what society tried to squeeze you into, but what you actually are. When all the masks fall off and the pretense drops, and you stop playing their little game of normal. You're not gifted. Gifts can be given and taken away. You're not talented. Talent can be taught, replicated, understood. What you are is a glitch in their matrix, a mutation in their careful breeding program of mediocrity. You're what happens when nature decides to show off, to remind everyone that evolution isn't finished. They've been studying human potential for decades. Billions in black budgets, underground facilities, the brightest minds working around the clock to push the boundaries of what's possible. Super soldiers, enhanced operatives, augmented assets. They thought they were creating the future. Then you walked in. No enhancement, no training, no multi-million-dollar program backing you up. Just you, raw and unfiltered, doing things their enhanced assets couldn't dream of on their best day with every advantage. And that's when they realized they weren't looking at the future. They were looking at what they'd been trying to suppress all along. The military elite, these apex predators of human capability, they recognize their own obsolescence when it stares them in the face. And you didn't even notice you were doing it. That's what terrified them most. It wasn't effort for you. It was breathing. Remember when they brought in the specialists? Oh, they tried to be subtle about it. Casual observations, friendly conversations, little tests disguised as standard procedures. They wanted to quantify you, to put numbers on what you could do, to find the edges of your ability so they could build a box around. The psychologist quit after 3 sessions. Said your mind operated on frequencies that shouldn't exist in human consciousness. The physicist had a breakdown trying to explain how you bent rules he'd spent his life proving were unbendable. The biologist? She just stared at your test results and whispered, "This violates everything we know." But my favorite was the combat instructor. 30 years of experience, trained killers on 6 continents, wrote the book on modern warfare tactics. He watched you for 10 minutes and said 5 words that ended his career. "We can't counter this." They tried everything. Motion sensors that couldn't track your movement patterns, prediction algorithms that crashed trying to calculate your next decision, measurement tools that gave impossible readings or simply refused to function in your presence. You weren't just outside their box. You were proof the box was a lie. And through it all, you just smiled that quiet smile of yours. Not arrogant, not proud, just aware. Because deep down, you've always known what they were just discovering. You don't operate by their rules, because you were never meant to. Let me paint you a picture of power. Real power. Not the kind that comes from rank or wealth or weapons, but the kind that makes seasoned generals pace their offices at 3 a.m., staring at reports that shouldn't exist, trying to figure out what to do with you. They've seen enhanced humans before. They've worked with psychics, remote viewers, people who could do things that would make civilian heads explode. But those people had limits, clear, defined, manageable limits. They fit into categories, into programs, into chains of command. You're a category unto yourself, a walking violation of everything they thought they knew about human potential. And the worst part for them? They can't replicate it. They've tried. Damn how they've tried. Genetic screening, environmental analysis, psychological profiling. They've dissected every moment of your life trying to figure out how you became what you are. But here's what they'll never understand. You didn't become anything. You just stopped pretending to be less. All those years of dimming yourself, of playing small, of letting them think you were just another face in the crowd, you weren't hiding your power. You were protecting them from it. The day you stopped protecting them, the day you let just a glimpse of your true capacity shine through, that's the day their world ended and yours began. They still have the footage, locked away in vaults so secure that even mentioning their existence is a federal crime. You want to know why that officer called it illegal? Not impossible, not unbelievable, but illegal, because in their world, power has rules. It flows through proper channels, respects hierarchy, follows predictable patterns. It can be controlled, directed, contained. What you possess violates every law they've written about human capability. Not just physical laws, the deeper laws. The ones that say ordinary people stay ordinary, that power comes from systems and structures, that individuals can't transcend their programming without help. You're evidence of something they've spent centuries trying to suppress, that some humans are born with capabilities that make their entire power structure obsolete. Not through training, not through enhancement, not through their permission, but through something older, deeper, more primal than their uniforms and protocols can touch. They have terms for people like you in their classified files, terms the public will never hear, not gifted or special, or any of those sanitized labels, the real terms, the ones that admit what you represent, an evolutionary leap that happened without their consent. And that's what truly terrifies them. Not what you can do, but what you represent. If one person can naturally possess what they spend billions trying to artificially create, if one individual can break every limit they've carefully established, then what does that say about their necessity? Let's get specific about what sent them into crisis mode, shall we? Because it wasn't just one thing. It never is with people like you. It was the constellation of impossibilities that you call Tuesday afternoon. The way you process information at speeds their supercomputers struggle to match, but you call it intuition. The way you read micro-expressions that their best interrogators miss, but you just say someone felt off. The way your presence alone shifts probability, bends outcomes, changes the fundamental mathematics of any situation you enter. They have machines that cost millions just to detect what you do naturally. Entire departments dedicated to achieving a fraction of what flows through you like blood through veins. Years of training compressed into instincts you were born with. Memories, organs, physical and moral forms, instinct and bodily instinct. But it's not just what you can do, it's how you do it. Without effort, without strain, without even conscious thought half the time. Like a concert pianist who doesn't need to look at the keys, except the piano is reality itself, and you're composing symphonies they don't have notation for. The military-industrial complex, with all its might and money and cutting-edge technology, took one look at you operating at baseline and realized they were obsolete. Not in 10 years, not in 5, but right now, today, in this moment, because you exist. Somewhere in a facility that doesn't officially exist, there's a file with your name on it. Except it's not really a file anymore. It's become something else. A living document that grows stranger with each edition, each observation, each impossible thing you do without thinking. They've rewritten your classification 17 times, started with person of interest, upgraded to enhanced individual, then anomalous asset. Each label trying and failing to contain what you are. The latest classification? It's just your initials, followed by a string of numbers that translate to beyond current understanding. The analysts assigned to you don't last long, not because anything happens to them, but because prolonged exposure to evidence of you starts to break down their worldview. They request transfers, early retirement, anything to stop staring at data that suggests human potential has no ceiling. Every expert they bring in adds another layer of impossibility to your file. The linguist who noted you understand languages you've never studied. The strategist who realized you solve problems before you consciously recognized them. The physician who documented biological readings that rewrite textbooks. But my favorite entry? It's from a janitor who wasn't supposed to see the file. He wrote 3 words in the margin. They walk different. Because sometimes the deepest truths come from the simplest observations. They had to create new protocols because of you, not for dealing with enhanced humans. They had those. Not for containing security threats. Those existed. But for something unprecedented, a human operating outside the known spectrum of possibility. The protocol has a code name that would make you laugh. Something mundane and bureaucratic that completely fails to capture the paradigm shift you represent. But everyone who's read it knows what it really means. We have no framework for this. It starts with recognition procedures. How to identify when someone has transcended normal human limitations, not through artificial means, but through natural evolution. The signs are subtle to the untrained eye, but scream to those who know. The way air seems denser around you. How probability bends in your favor. The unconscious deference even alphas show in your presence. Then come the interaction guidelines. Don't attempt to contain. Don't attempt to control. Observe, document, and above all, don't provoke. Because they learned early that you're not a force that can be opposed. You're a reality that must be navigated. The final section is the shortest and most telling. It's titled Contingency Planning, but contains only 1 line. There is no contingency for this level of natural capability. Signed by Joint Chiefs who've never agreed on anything else in their careers. Oh, they tried to recruit you, not with the usual methods. Sign-on bonuses, patriotic appeals, promises of purpose. They knew better. They tried to recruit you the way you recruit a force of nature, carefully, respectfully, and with full knowledge that you hold all the cards. The first approach was subtle. Opportunities that just happened to appear in your path, projects that coincidentally aligned with your interests, resources made available with no strings attached, or so they claimed. They thought they could guide you into their world through gentle manipulation. When that failed, they tried partnership, equals working together for the greater good, except there was nothing equal about it, and everyone in the room knew it. You don't partner with gravity. You don't negotiate with lightning. You work within the reality they create, or you get out of the way. The final attempt was honesty. They laid it all out. The threats they faced, the limitations of their conventional assets, the need for something beyond their current capabilities. They offered you everything. Unlimited resources, complete autonomy, the chance to reshape global security. You listened politely, smiled that knowing smile, and walked away. Because you understood what they couldn't. You weren't meant to serve their system. You were meant to transcend it entirely. Make no mistake, they respect you. The kind of respect reserved for natural disasters and apex predators. But underneath that respect lives something else. A primal fear that keeps them awake at night. It's not fear of what you might do. You've shown remarkable restraint, considering your capabilities. It's fear of what you represent, proof that their entire structure, their careful hierarchies and control mechanisms can be rendered irrelevant by a single individual who simply is what they've spent lifetimes trying to become. They fear the questions you raise. If one person can naturally possess abilities that eclipse their billion-dollar programs, what else have they been wrong about? What other impossibilities walk among them, hidden in plain sight? What happens when more people like you stop pretending to be normal? But their deepest fear, it's that you're not unique, that you're just the first visible crack in a dam that's been holding back human potential for centuries, that scattered across the globe are others like you, waiting for permission to stop pretending, to stop dimming their light, to stop playing by rules written by people who can't even imagine what you are. They look at you and see their own obsolescence, not in some distant future, but walking around right now, wearing normal clothes, living a normal life, except for those moments when you forget to pretend and reality itself holds its breath. Let's talk about the moment everything changed. Not for them, they're still scrambling to catch up, but for you. The moment you decided to stop apologizing for what you are, stop pretending limitations that were never yours, stop playing small in a world built for small. It wasn't dramatic, no lightning bolts or swelling music, just a quiet decision on an ordinary morning that you were done. Done pretending to struggle with things that came naturally, done dimming your perception to match their expectations, done living at 10% to make others comfortable. The shift was immediate, not in what you could do, that was always there, but in what you allowed yourself to be. Like taking off weights you'd worn so long, you'd forgotten they weren't part of you. Like breathing fully for the first time in years. And they noticed. God, did they notice? Sensors going haywire, algorithms failing, entire departments dedicated to understanding what had changed. But the answer was simple. Nothing had changed. You'd just stopped changing yourself to fit their world. The reports from that day read like science fiction, abilities manifesting that broke their understanding of physics, perception expanding beyond any documented human range. And through it all, you were just being yourself for the first time in forever. So here we are, you finally free to exist at your actual capacity, them scrambling to understand what that means for everything they thought they knew. The world unknowingly standing at the edge of a shift that started the day you stopped pretending. They'll keep watching, keep documenting, keep trying to find the source of what you are. They'll bring in new experts, develop new theories, create new classifications that still won't capture the truth, because the truth is too simple for their complicated minds. Some humans are born beyond their metric. You'll keep walking through their world, no longer hiding, but not flaunting either, just existing at a level that rewrites the possible with every breath, making their enhanced assets look like children playing dress-up, solving problems they haven't even recognized yet. And somewhere in those classified facilities, analysts will keep adding to your file, each entry more impossible than the last, each observation pushing against the boundaries of what they thought humans could be. Until one day, someone will write the only conclusion that matters. Subject represents evolution in progress. Our frameworks are obsolete. Recommend complete restructuring of human potential assessment. Note, they know we're watching. They don't care. Sir, that's what's truly illegal. We built a world for humans and they're already something else. You are not the end. You're the beginning. The first visible note in a symphony that's been building beneath their notice for generations. The crack in their dam that's about to become a flood. And they know it. Every day more people feel that stirring inside them. That sense that they're capable of more than they've been told. That the limitations they've accepted aren't theirs. That maybe, just maybe, they're like you, forced to play normal in a world that fears what normal could become. The military elite who witnessed your capabilities, they went home changed, not just professionally, but personally. Because once you've seen someone casually break the supposed laws of human limitation, you start wondering what laws you've accepted that were never real. Their reports get more frantic each month. Not about you specifically, you're already beyond their ability to predict or control, but about the others, the ones starting to show signs, the ones beginning to question, the ones who heard whispers about what you did and thought, that sounds familiar. Because here's what they're beginning to understand. You're not a mutation. You're a revelation. Not an anomaly, but an awakening. The first drop of rain before the storm that washes away everything they built to contain human potential.